Hello and welcome back to another episode of Math with Sohn. Today we are going to be graphing inequality parabolas. So let's get into it. So if you have a y is less than or equal to negative x squared plus 6x plus 7, and you wanted to graph it, you graph it exactly like a regular parabola, except because it's an inequality, because it's less than or equal to, you're going to also have to shade. So there are three different forms for graphing inequalities or parabolas. This would be standard form. If it's in standard form, you have to do negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a. And the b is the number in front of the x, so that would be negative 6. And the a would be the number in front of the x squared, which is negative 1. So from here, we would have negative 6 over negative 2, which is, of course, 3, because if you divided those two things together, you would get 3. And from here, you would have to take that x value, which is the x value of the vertex, and plug it in. If we were to plug that in, we would end up with negative 1 times 3 squared plus 6 times 3 plus 7. And then you would end up with negative 9, because that's 9 times negative 1, plus 18 plus 7, and that is going to equal 16 when it's all said and done. So we have our vertex, x comma y, 3, 16, dot. This particular graph is going to go down, and it's going to have to go down through the 7 for the y-intercept, which this is the y-intercept for those of us that don't know yet. And the only other thing we would need to do from here is you might have your teacher ask you to find these values. We're going to do that in like the next problem. But you would need to shade. If it is less than or equal to, we have to take this vertex and shade below the vertex. So that would be everything below the vertex, which would be this part right here. And that is how you graph an inequality. So sometimes you're going to be asked to graph, and sometimes you won't be asked to graph. It'll be a solving situation. If it is a solving situation, hopefully you'll have a problem that looks something like this, like x is greater than x plus 4 and x minus 6, and it will already be factored, but that won't be every situation. But if it is already factored, then I encourage you to graph by starting with your x-intercepts, and you find your x-intercepts by setting these equal to 0. Subtract 4, x would equal negative 4. Add 6, x would equal positive 6. And you get your two x-intercepts. And if you're solving, you're treating this as if it's equal to a y. But in reality, it would be like greater than 0 is greater than this, or something like that. So I did make that mistake. I'm sorry. If you're solving, it would be equal to 0, because you're actually looking for the x values. But you graph to solve, and you would graph from factored form. That's a key. It would have to be from factored form. So if I plotted the negative 4, and if I plotted the positive 6, and I were to graph this parabola, first off, it's not going to be a solid line. It's going to be a dotted line because it doesn't have the equal to symbol underneath. And it is greater than. If it is greater than, I would have to shade above wherever the vertex is. But if you're solving, these 2 points are the points that matter. And you have to ask yourself, is the shading in between the arms or on the outside of the arms? And the shading in this case is in between the arms. And because the shading is in between the arms, the answer for x is going to be in between those two numbers, which means that it's going to be the negative 4 less than x less than 6. Or you could also say from negative 4 to 6 would be the solution set for x. So this would be x is equal to negative 4 to 6, or you could say x is in between the negative 4 and the 6. All right? That's if it's already factored. If it's not already factored, guess what? we just have to factor it. So I'm going to give you another problem, one more, and then we're going to factor and do the same sort of thing. And then I'm going to do a recap and review just to make sure that you see a difference between the shading. So this next one, well, let's say we have 0 is less than x squared minus 6x minus 7. If you need to factor this, you're looking for what would multiply to -7 but would add to -6. If you are struggling with factoring, I would recommend just looking at the factoring video. I want to keep this on solving inequalities, not on factoring at the moment. I have a factoring video. Highly recommend looking at it. So we got x minus 7 and x plus 1, because that's what multiplies to -7 but adds to -6. And then from here, you can set each one individually equal to 0, which is going to just change the signs of both of them. We're going to get positive 7, and we're going to get -1. So we graph positive 7 and -1. And while we're graphing this, we also have our vertex, y-intercept of -7, which is convenient. From that number right there, that's the y-intercept. And you may also be asking yourself, why, Mr. Zone, did you not do negative b over 2a? When you're solving, you're not as concerned about the vertex as you are with the x-intercepts. So you could do negative b over 2a, but that's not going to help you find these two numbers right here. So that's why I factored instead of doing negative b over 2a. It would be a dotted line. And if I wanted to find my vertex, I'm guessing it's somewhere around here, like at, I don't know, 3, -8 or something like that. We have to shade if it is less than below the vertex. So the shading this time is going to be over here. And you have to ask yourself, is the shading in between the arms or outside of the arms? And you're looking specifically at the number line part. The shading is on the outside of the number line, like from here, from the x values. So that means that the values for x are going to be to the left of -1 and to the right of the positive 7. So that would be x is going from, well, you could think of it from to the left of -1, less than -1, not equal to, because it didn't have the equal to symbol. Or it could be greater than positive 7. Which wouldn't technically need to, should be written that way. It should be like an and symbol as well. You could also say -infinity up into -1, parentheses around both because it does not equal it. And, which would be a u, from 7 to positive infinity. Parentheses because it does not equal it. If it equaled it, you would use the bracket. So if it actually equaled to 7, it doesn't. You would use the bracket. It doesn't, so that's gone. Okay, so if the shading is on the outside, answers are going away. If the shading's on the outside, the answer, like the x values are going away from it. And if the shading is on the inside, the answers are going towards it, the in between the -4 and the 6. Versus here, it was on the outside. Everything else remains the same. It's just factoring with a twist. That's all you're really doing. But if you're graphing, it's just graphing with shading. And you can either graph by vertex form, factored form, all the other forms that we have learned and had on this channel. Until next time, however, I'm just droning on. Stay positive, folks, and I will see y'all later. Bye.